Let me bring it up. We're going to look at the prophet Haggai. We just looked at Zephaniah. We're concluding the minor prophets. We began with Hosea, the book of God's steadfast love. Then we looked at Joel, the book of the day of the Lord. Amos, the book of justice. Obadiah, the book of retribution. Jonah, the book of mercy on the Gentiles. And then we looked at Nahum, the book of vengeance. We looked at Habakkuk, the book of the watchman. Zephaniah, the book of God's anger. And today we're looking at the prophet Haggai, the book of rebuilding the temple. We'll conclude tomorrow. Will not conclude, but almost conclude with looking at Zechariah. Zechariah and Haggai ministered together. They're what I call a prophetic team. Even though the other prophets like Jeremiah, Habakkuk, Ezekiel, Zephaniah ministered at the same time, they had different years in which they ministered and different locations. But Haggai and Zechariah were two prophets that God sent to Israel to encourage them in the rebuilding of the temple, because after the captivity, they started rebuilding the walls, the temple, and because of opposition from the people of that land, the projects were slowed. Eventually, Nehemiah finished. And the same thing happens during Haggai's day, that the people are discouraged in building. But God sends a prophet by the name of Haggai and Zechariah, and they begin to encourage the people and prophesy for them to rebuild the temple. This shows you the power of prophets as builders. They work with apostolic leaders and pastors to build, and also shows you the power of encouragement and one of the major functions of prophetic ministries. Let's look at it. Haggai ministered to the Jews who were rebuilding the temple along with Zechariah. Haggai is a post-exilic prophet or post-captivity prophet who prophesied to Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest. He rebuked the people for their lack of zeal in rebuilding. Haggai also prophesied to encourage the people to overcome the opposition of their enemies in rebuilding the temple. He warned them that they would not prosper while the house of God laid waste. Now, this is an important principle because sometimes people neglect the house of God and they were building their own houses. And God said, you're not going to prosper. You bring in much, you carry out little, and it's like you're putting money in a bag with holes. Because you're not taking care of my house and you're taking care of your house. And so this is a warning, a prophetic warning to the people that if they did not take care of God's house, that they would have a bag with holes. They would never be able to really prosper. The people did finish the building because of the exhortation of Haggai. The glory of the latter house is a picture of the new covenant glory and the church. When he said the glory of the latter house shall be greater than the glory of the former house. We know the glory came in when Solomon dedicated the first temple. But after that destruction, there's a greater glory coming, and it did come with the erection of the church because we are now the temple of God. Ezra stated that the Jews prospered through the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah. That's Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 14. Key verses, Haggai 1 and 4. Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Haggai 1:6. You have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but you have not enough. You drink, but you're not filled with drink. You clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it in a bag with holes. Wow. We often decree that our bags will not have holes based on this verse, Haggai 1 and 6. Haggai 1:7. Thus saith even the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Haggai 1:8. Go up to the mountain and bring wood and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. And then Haggai 2 and 8. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this house will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. Keywords: consider, house, and build. Consider. The people were to consider their ways. Sometimes if we're not prospering, if we're not being blessed, we need to consider what we're doing or what we're not doing. House. The house of the Lord was laid waste while the people built their houses. Build. Haggai encouraged Zerubbabel and the people to build the house. And then key figures: Haggai, Zerubbabel, Joshua, the high priest, and Cyrus. Haggai, a post-exilic or post-captivity prophet sent by God to encourage the people to finish the building of the house of the Lord. Zerubbabel, the person responsible for laying the foundation of the restored temple and the builder of the house. Joshua, the high priest, responsible for the sacrificial system of the restored temple. Haggai actually gives Joshua a word, a personal word in this book, because Joshua was dealing with satanic opposition, preventing him from being a part of this rebuilding process. Cyrus, the Persian king who issued the decree for the temple in Jerusalem to be rebuilt. Now he works along with Zechariah. We'll talk about Zechariah tomorrow, the book of Visions of Messiah. What a powerful book. But this is the book of rebuilding the temple. Let God rebuild our temple. Let God rebuild. Sometimes the church is not full of glory. Sometimes the church is desert. I believe that we're seeing that in revival, that God brings back his glory to the church. When people mock the church, Jesus said that you're the salt of the earth. When the salt has lost its flavor, it's good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. But God is always a God of restoration, and God will restore the temple. If you have suffered desolation in your personal life, and you're not in the place you are as the temple of God, the place of prayer, worship, the word, holiness, the presence of God, you need to return to the Lord. Sometimes people are backslidden. God will restore your temple. God will restore his dwelling place in you. So it's really a book about restoration, a book about the power of prophecy, the power of the prophetic. They prospered through the prophesying of Haggai. And I always mention that one of the things that happens when prophets minister and people hear a true prophet, they will prosper. I talk about that in this book, The Prophet's Manual. One of the functions of the prophet, and one of them is to bring prosperity by challenging people to consider their ways, as Haggai did. The people did consider their ways. They did repent. They did obey these prophets. The house was rebuilt, restored. The temple was rebuilt, restored, and the people began to prosper. What an amazing truth. What an amazing word that we found today.